I'm gonna be making a little tutorial about how to make a login page. So to start, I'm going to go to this game object tab up here, go to UI, and I'm going to create a canvas. This canvas is basically where we'll put all of our objects because this is going to be 2D and UI. Next, I'm going to go back to game object UI, and I'm going to create a panel. And even though it's called a panel, it's basically going to be our background. So that's what I'm going to rename it. I'm renaming it up here. And then I don't like this background sprite or image, so I'm going to set it to none instead. And I'm going to change the color. I want it to be a background, so I don't want any transparency. That's what this is down here. This is transparency. So I'm going to set it all the way up, and it's just going to be a very white background. Now I also am planning on creating this for mobile, so I want to start looking in, or with the correct resolution. So the way you do that is in the game tab up here. This is scene, this is game. I want to switch free aspect to something, a phone size. So I'm going to switch it to Android. So now this is kind of what an Android phone will look like. It won't be exactly like this, but something like this. To make it so everything scales correctly as well, I also need to change the canvas so that it's not so that the canvas scaler is not a constant pixel size, but is actually scale with the screen size. And then this reference resolution, we're going to use the resolution we're currently using, which you can see up here, is 400 by 800. I'm going to type that in. Great. Okay, so we've got our background. Now we're going to start adding another UI object. We will add, I guess we'll add a title first, so let's add a text object. I'm going to switch to scene view so I can work with it a little better. Here's our text object. I'm just going to go ahead and move this where I want to, a little bit at least. If you look up here, we've got these different ways to move it as well. So I can move it with this tool, which is very nice if I want to keep it on a specific axis. This tool is great too. This is just very simple to move, and it helps line it up on the center, which is what I want. I want this to be centered. I can set the width, which I think will be something like 300 by, maybe not that big, by 50. And then I'm going to call this title, or I guess login page might be better. I want this to be centered, so that's what this alignment part is for. And this alignment centers it vertically. And then that font size is way too small, so we're going to bring it up. That's pretty good. I want it to be bold, so I change that here with the font style. There we go. I don't want it to be black, so I'm going to change the color here, maybe a nice blue. I think that's good. Okay, so there's that login page. Now, if you can see these arrows here, I'm not sure if they're showing up very well. There's these arrows I can resize. These are called anchors. Anchors, they're basically where an object will anchor to when it's resized. So since this is centered, the object is anchored to the center, and if I resize the page, see how it moved up kind of, because the page got bigger, so it just moved up. But I don't want it to move up. I want it to stay exactly where it is and just resize. So the way I do that is I need these anchors to be on the corners. The corner, if it's exactly on the corners, if the anchors are exactly on the corners, then it won't move up like it did. So the way I'm going to do that is I have this nice tool in my editor folder. It's called UGUI Tools. I'll share it with everyone. But anyways, what this tool does is if I have the text object selected and I go to UGUI up here and I just click anchors to corners, it puts the anchors right on the corners, which is great. And then now if I go back to game and I resize, it doesn't change its location. It resizes right in place, which is great. So we're going to be doing that with basically every object that we're creating so that in any resolution it'll look pretty much the same. Okay, so we'll go back to the scene. We've got our title. Now I'm going to create an image. So this will be like our icon or logo or whatever. Just so you guys can see what it's like to create an image. I'm going to move this up to something like that. Okay, you can't see anything because it's white. I can just change the color real quick. That's what it looks like. I'm going to give it a better sprite. So let's go here. This icon right here, I'm going to change the color back to white because it's adding some red right now. Great. Now, if you notice, it's kind of stretched weird. So if you look actually down here, you should see the image size is 190 by 273. Whenever you put a sprite into the source image, it'll show up down here and it'll show you the intended size. So I'm going to change this to that size. And now I know it seems huge, right? So obviously this doesn't make sense. So all we're going to do now is just scale it. We're going to change the scale parameter. Do something like 0.3 maybe. I think that's pretty good. And then because I'm just scaling it based on its original size, it won't have any of that stretching. And then I think it's in a pretty good spot. I'm just going to make sure it's centered again. I think that's good. And so I'm going to do the same thing I did before where I anchors to corners so that it will resize correctly. The anchors are actually pretty far out in this case because the image is scaled. So something else we might want to do instead, we'll see if this has any effect. It looks pretty good still. But another way you could do this so that that doesn't happen is if I set this back to 1, I can actually just, let me go back to this so I can see the width. I can just use a calculator and divide by the scale that I want. And if I did that, let me do that real quick. I want to do 190 divided by, actually let's just do 190 times 0.3, the exact same scale I just did. 57, and then I'll do the same with the height. Great, so this is the exact same thing I did before, although now if I anchors to corners, it'll actually be on the corners instead of the way it was before. So either way I believe works. I like this way a little better just because the anchors are right on the corners and it's not overlapping with anything else. But I think either way should be fine. Okay, so there's our logo. Now we're going to start creating input fields. So what I'm going to do to start this is create another panel. And I'm going to bring this down. Start maybe like maybe right here. So if I center this, that's what I'm doing here. Is I'm changing the I'm changing the anchor presets. So this is stretch, which just means it fills the entire screen, which I don't want. So I'm changing it to center so I can see what the width looks like, the width and height. And I mean, I can also just change the height like this, but I was going to set a specific number, maybe 400 by 400. Okay, I think that's good for what we're going to do. You can see there's a different color, and that's because it's still using this background layer. We're actually just going to make it completely transparent, but I don't want to do that yet. I want to leave it visible while I'm working on it. And so what we're going to do now is, I guess we should start by anchoring to corners. There we go. And then we're going to add, actually we're going to add a vertical layout group. So this is how you add components. Components or help organize, at least in this case. So I'm going to take off these force expands. I'll let you see what it looks like with them on real quick. If I just add, let's say, an image to this panel. So if I did control size, it would just make sure that it fills the entire size, which I don't want. I should change the color. Oops, not of the panel, of the image. Okay, so when I forced the width and the height to control size, it filled the entire thing because it's a layout group. And so if I create another one, this second image will fill out exactly the other half. Now I don't want it to do that, so I'm going to take those off. And force expand, why don't we do the other way and you'll see. So it's controlling the size and width, but it's not expanding it. So again, this is how this works. So I don't want either of those. I want to be able to control it entirely. So let me get rid of these images. So the main point of this was for inputs. So we're going to go to UI, and we're going to create an input field, and we're going to put it inside the panel. And now it got moved directly up to the top, and you can even see the anchors got moved to the top too. The vertical layout group sets the anchors for you, which is why it's really nice. But we don't want it in the top left. So we're actually going to move it to middle center, which I think is good. And then this, we'll call this username, and what I want is a text right above it, so I'm going to create another text. There you go. So if you noticed, when I had this below, it got moved down. So this ordering in the hierarchy here, it actually matters because it determines where an object is in the layout group. So I want this to be above the username, which is why I moved it up, because this is going to be username text. This should actually be username input. Okay, and then this will just say username. I want it to be bigger than that. So if you notice also, now you can't even see the text, and that's because the font size is too big. It's actually overflowing, which you can see here. If I were to allow this, you could see it. You almost never want to allow overflow, because when it resizes, it might actually overflow into a different object. So I would suggest not changing these. Instead, you just want to make sure it's a font size that will fit, or you want to resize. So I could do something like this. So I wouldn't be able to do this if in the panel I had checked these boxes. So it's good I didn't, because then I can change the size of just this username. And now you can see that it's at the top here, which kind of looks bad. So I'm going to move the orientation down to the bottom. Okay, and then do I want to center it? Not really. I think I want it to be on the side. And then now you can also see there's no spacing really between these two. So in order to fix that, I go back to this outer panel. We'll just call this input panel. And I add spacing between the two elements. So let's add 20, or maybe 10. Looks good. And then I can, also change the color of this again. I think I'm going to leave it black for now. And so this seems good. So I could create a new one for the password. And let me see, let me change this to password text. Password input. And then I have to go back and change this to password. Oops, don't add an extra space. Okay, so you can see I have a username and password input field. If I wanted to space them out differently, then something I could do, which is really handy, is I can create another panel that goes inside this panel. Let me put it at the top. There we go. I can give it whatever width I want. I think I'll give it 400 or 300 maybe. Something like that. I'll change this later, so this doesn't really matter right now. It's just to get an idea. And then I'm going to drag these two objects into this panel. And I'm actually going to move them up too. So now that they're inside this panel, the panel is being affected by the vertical layout group, but these objects aren't. So that allows me to still have some semblance of a layout group while still being able to keep these two as far away from possible as I want, which is nice. The password and username as far away from possible as I want. So what I'm going to do now, I can also resize this to look a little better. I'm going to change the size. It doesn't need to be that big. So we're going to do something like that, which is good. And then I'm going to start, I can move these around now anywhere. But I still want them to look nice together. So I'll move them about the distance I want, and then I'll resize this panel. I want to switch to this so I can resize it nicely. There we go. Looks like I'm going to need to move them both up a little bit. And then resize this panel some more. There. That's pretty much what I want. I'm actually just going to delete these for now. And then just copy this panel. And I think that looks pretty good. Password. Oh, I should rename these. Make sure to name everything. It will help in the long run. Password panel. Password text. Password input. Okay. So now I can add more space, more spacing between them, and it won't add more spacing in between the username text and the username input field. It'll only add space between the panels, which is what I want, so that these parts stay close together while these parts are separate. I don't want it to be that separate, that's a lot, but maybe something like that. And then now I think it looks pretty good, so I'm going to get rid of all of this background stuff. So for all the panels, I want to go to their color section and just change the alpha value. I can even multi-select to do that. There we go. Great. And then just to keep in mind that we want to constantly be checking that it resizes correctly. Let's see, let's check. Yeah, it looks good. I don't know if maybe this is too small. You could make it bigger. For now, I'm not going to, but anyways. I do want to change some things about the text though. So there's this placeholder text which you can change right here, and I want this to say username instead of just enter text. So that's what shows up when they haven't input anything. I also can change the font size of both of these. Although in order to see that, I'd need to make this a little bigger. I'm actually going to just copy this this width or this height and do the same thing for this one. and then I will use the same font size. What did I use? 20? Okay, I'll use 20. And then I don't want this placeholder to just say enter text. I want it to say password. Great. And then I can also specify what kind of username I want. So this is, right now it's just basically any input is valid for the most part, but I can choose what type of content type. You can see that, content type. So I want this to be maybe an email address. So I'll switch that to an email address, and I'll give it, I don't know what's a good character limit, but if you leave it at 0, it just means that it can be any amount of character input. It's like infinite. I'm going to say 50 characters. And then if I go to password input, this I want to be hidden. I want the password to be hidden. So I'm going to change it to a password content type. And I'll make this maybe 10. And that should be pretty much it. I can show you what that looks like. So here I am typing an email. And then here I am typing a password, which you shouldn't be able to see, which is nice. And then I can't type anymore because I've reached 10. So it's pretty simple to set up. Okay. And then finally, I'm noticing, never mind. Okay, great. Now this looks good. Actually, I think we need to anchor to corner these inner parts. So I'm going to do that. Yeah, we do. We do need to do that. There. I'll help it resize better. Same with this one. Let me just select everything that we need to do. Oh no, you can't multi-select actually with this tool. It doesn't work. You have to do each one individually. Okay, great. Let me just check again that it resizes well. Looks good to me. Okay, finally I want a login button. So I'm going to go to Game Object again, UI, and button. I'm going to move this button to a position I like, maybe right there. I'm going to change the width and height a little bit, maybe make it a little bit wider. Yeah, I think that's fine. And then maybe I want to change the color. I think I want it to be green. Seems like a good login button color. So something like that. That might be kind of ugly, but it's good for now. And then this text is way too small, so I'm going to go change this. Maybe 35. And I don't want to say button, I want to say login. And I think I want it to be white as well. Maybe not. No, I think that's good. Okay, I think I want it to be bold too. Okay, cool. That was pretty simple. That's for the most part everything. I should UGUI anchors to corners again. Great. It looks like my button's a little bit inside this panel, so I might want to move it down, actually. It's okay if they overlap, it's better not to. I'm going to rename it too. Okay, great. So that's it for probably the UI part. I'm going to show you a little bit of what the programming would look like. I've already got a script here that I'll just show you. Visual Studio is opening. Very slowly. 1 sec. second. I have to minimize this. There we go. Okay. So here's the script. Very simple. So I've created an input field variable, and I've serialized it. Basically, the serialization just makes it so I can, in the editor, I can drag in the input field I want to be for this variable. Same with the password. To do these, I needed to use unityengine.ui. Make sure you do that. Input fields are a UI component, and they won't show up unless you have this at the top. So then I just created a very simple script. This script should not have any parameters, otherwise the button component won't be able to take it. There are ways around that. They're a little more complicated though, so for now I'm not going to show that. Basically what I'm doing is I'm taking the text from the username input field up here. I'm trimming it just to get rid of white space in case someone added a space for some reason. And then I want it to be all lower so that it's not case sensitive. It shouldn't be case sensitive. It's a username. And then for password, it is case sensitive, and if there is white space, I don't want it to work, so I just am leaving it as is. So I'm getting the text. I'm just checking to see if either are blank, a very simple check. You can do a much more in-depth check if you want, but that's all I'm doing. And then if everything was filled out, obviously normally you would connect to a server and check, but because I'm not going to do that, I just load a new scene if everything's filled out. So very simple script. This function won't work unless you are using unityengine.scenemanagement. So these two I added. Okay, that's it for the script. Now I need to make sure that this button is using that script when you click on it. So the way to do that is I go down to this button component of the login button. I click on the plus for on click. I'm going to drag in, I actually need an object first that has the script. So I'll do that real quick. I'm going to create an empty object, and we're just going to call this login manager. And I'm going to, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to reset the orientation. This just puts it at 0, 0, 0, which is good. I just did that by clicking this gear. It's a very nice tool. And then I'm going to add the script component to this game object. And it wants a username and password. That's from the script that I showed you. That's how this works. That's why it's asking for a username and password. So all I'm going to do is drag in, let's see, the username panel, or not the panel, the input field. See, it wouldn't even let me drag it in because it's not an input field, it's a panel. And then password input field. Great. I'm going to hit save real quick. Oh god, it's okay, maybe I won't hit save real quick. And then what I'm going to do is on the button, I have this on click event that's waiting to be filled in. I'm going to drag in the login manager to this spot. I'm going to click on the no function and change it to login and find check login info. That's the function that I wrote. And that's it. That's all I have to do. And then if I hit play, well, first of all, one last thing. I need to make sure that my scenes are in the build settings. So I went to File, Build Settings. And I've got these two scenes, but the current scene is actually... Okay, I need to save it first. Let me save this scene. Login 2. Okay, this is login 2. This one I can just remove. Okay. I need this to actually be in the 0 index spot, and this is in the 1 index spot. Okay. Great. So now if I hit play, first of all, if I try to log in without inputting the username and password, I get this debug, which I put in the script. Now if I fill them both out, and I hit login, I get taken to the next page. So very simple. That's basically how you would set up a login page. Obviously you'd have a lot more detail later, but if you have any questions, let me know. That's all that I have for you. So thanks for watching.